I remember the moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind of night when the world outside seems to fade into the background, and the familiar warmth of home wraps around you like a favorite blanket. I was sitting in my living room, the remnants of dinner still scattered on the coffee table, when I heard the unmistakable sound of my wife's laughter filtering through the house. It was a sound I had come to cherish, but that night it felt foreign, tainted somehow. As I leaned back against the couch, I couldn't help but feel a pang of unease. It wasn't just her laughter, it was the way it echoed through the empty halls of our home, a stark contrast to the silence that usually enveloped our evenings together. I pushed those thoughts aside, dismissing them as paranoia. After all, she was my wife and I trusted her implicitly. But then my phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting a notification from work, but instead it was a message from a friend. Saw your wife with a photographer today. Looked cozy. My heart sank. I knew the photographer. He had been our wedding photographer, a seemingly nice guy with a knack for capturing moments. But now the thought of him with my wife twisted something deep inside me. I tried to shake it off, but the images flooded my mind, uninvited and relentless. I imagined them together, her laughter mingling with his, sharing moments that were supposed to be ours. I felt anger bubbling up, a hot wave that threatened to consume me. I couldn't let it go. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, and walked towards the bedroom where I found her sitting on the bed, scrolling through her phone. "Who were you with today?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with an edge I didn't intend. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face, quickly masked by a smile that felt insincere. "Just some friends from work," she replied, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. It was a lie and I could sense it. Friends or a friend? I pressed, my heart racing. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with unspoken truths. She hesitated again, and I felt a sickening knot form in my stomach. "Just a friend," she said finally. But I could see the cracks in her facade. The laughter I had heard earlier now felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "What's his name?" She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. I felt a rush of adrenaline as the realization hit me like a slap across the face. She didn't want to tell me. She didn't want me to know. "Is it the photographer?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but the question hung heavy in the air. Her silence was all the answer I needed. My world shattered in that instant, pieces of trust and love scattering like glass around me. I felt a surge of anger, not just at her but at myself for being so blind. How could she betray me like this? My mind raced as I grappled with the betrayal, the confusion, and the anger that threatened to drown me. I had given her everything, and she had thrown it all away for a fleeting moment of passion with a man I had trusted. The realization that I had been living a lie clawed at me, and I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let this go unpunished. My heart was heavy with rage and a burning desire for revenge. I didn't know what that would look like yet, but I could feel it brewing inside me, a storm that was just beginning to take shape. As I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, I realized that my life had just taken a dark turn. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming, but I felt a strange sense of clarity. I would make sure he lost everything. He wouldn't just be a fleeting shadow in our lives. He would pay for what he had done. I turned away from her, the weight of my decision settling in. I had entered a world of darkness, and I was ready to embrace it. In the days that followed, my mind was a whirlwind of memories and emotions. I found myself going through the motions of daily life while my heart felt like it was encased in ice. Each time I saw her, I was reminded of the betrayal, and the laughter that had once brought me joy now echoed like a haunting reminder of what I'd lost. I replayed my memories with her, searching for signs, for anything that might have hinted at her infidelity. We had met in college, two idealistic kids who believed in love and forever. Our relationship blossomed in the glow of shared dreams and late-night conversations. I remember our first date, how we laughed over dinner, how she had looked in that red dress that hugged her curves perfectly. I had fallen for her hard, and I had thought she felt the same. We built a life together, filled with hopes, ambitions, and plans for a future that now felt like a cruel joke. Our wedding day had been magical. I still remember the flowers, the music, the way she looked walking down the aisle, radiant and glowing. The photographer had captured every moment, and I had trusted him to preserve our memories. Now, I felt a deep sense of anger towards him, a man who had invaded our most intimate moments and turned them into a weapon against me. How could he betray that trust? I found myself spiraling into darker thoughts. I had always prided myself on being a rational person, someone who could take a step back and evaluate a situation before making a decision. But now I was consumed by a need for vengeance. I couldn't help but replay scenarios in my head, imagining what I could do to ruin the man who had dared to take my wife from me. In the quiet moments, I reflected on the essence of my marriage. We had shared so many beautiful memories, our travels, the late-night talks, the simple joys of cooking dinner together. It was hard to reconcile those moments with the reality that she had chosen someone else over me. Each memory felt tainted, like a beautiful painting smeared with mud. I would catch her looking at me, her eyes clouded with guilt, and I would feel a flicker of pity. But that pity was quickly replaced by anger. How could she look at me with those eyes, knowing what she had done? I felt trapped in a cycle of betrayal and resentment, unable to break free. I started to notice the little things that I had previously overlooked. The way she hesitated to answer my questions, the way she would often check her phone, her laughter that now felt forced. I felt like a detective piecing together clues that had been right in front of me all along. I was angry, but I was also heartbroken. The woman I loved had betrayed me in the most profound way, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered trust. Late at night, when the world was quiet, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The thought of her with him made my blood boil. I imagined confronting her, demanding to know why she had chosen him over me, but that wouldn't bring me the peace I craved. Instead, I began to fantasize about revenge, about ensuring that the photographer would never work again, that he would feel the same pain I was experiencing. I started to gather information. I knew I had to be strategic. I needed to understand who he was, how he operated, and what made him tick. The more I learned, the more I felt a sense of purpose. I could not let him continue to thrive in an industry that he had so callously exploited. As I delved deeper into my plan, I felt a shift within myself. The anger that had consumed me began to morph into something else, something darker, more focused. I was no longer just a husband betrayed, I was a man on a mission. I had a goal, and I would see it through to the end, no matter the cost. I sat in front of my computer, researching the wedding photography industry, reading reviews, and finding forums where clients discussed their experiences. It was time to strategize. I would dismantle his reputation piece by piece, ensuring that he would lose everything he had built. I knew it was wrong, but in that moment the thrill of the plan eclipsed the moral implications. I had to act. The more I immersed myself in this plan, the clearer it became that I was no longer just a man dealing with heartbreak. I was a predator stalking my prey. The photographer's name was Mark, and as I delved deeper, I discovered that he had built a solid reputation in the wedding industry. His portfolio was impressive, filled with breathtaking images that captured the essence of love and joy. It made my blood boil. How could he portray such beauty while simultaneously destroying mine? I started by creating a profile on social media. I didn't want to raise any suspicion, so I crafted an alias. It was easy enough to set up an account, and I began following him, lurking in the shadows, watching his every move. I quickly learned that he was active on various platforms, showcasing his work and interacting with potential clients. It was a goldmine of information, and I intended to exploit it. As I scrolled through his posts, I began to see the cracks in his facade. There were comments from clients praising his work, but also a few that expressed dissatisfaction. I took note of those, feeling a sense of satisfaction. If I could amplify those negative experiences, I might be able to chip away at his reputation. I started formulating a plan. The first step was to gather testimonies from clients who had been unhappy with his work. I reached out to several of them, posing as a concerned friend looking out for a couple considering hearing him. Most people were more than willing to share their experiences, and it wasn't long before I had a collection of negative reviews that I could use to my advantage. Next, I decided to dig into his personal life. I needed leverage, something that would not only tarnish his professional reputation but also expose his character. I spent hours researching online, combing through public records and social media, looking for anything that could serve as ammunition. I found his personal website, where he shared not only his portfolio but also bits and pieces of his life, his interests, his family, and even testimonials from past clients. It was there that I stumbled upon a small detail that could prove pivotal, a mention of his involvement in a local charity event. It was an annual wedding fair where vendors showcased their services, and it was an opportunity for couples to meet potential photographers. This could be my chance to strike at the heart of his business. If I could expose him there, it would not only hurt his reputation but also his client base. I crafted a plan to attend the wedding fair, posing as a potential client. I would gather information, speak to other vendors, and perhaps even confront him in a way that would leave a lasting impression. It felt exhilarating to think that I could be a part of his downfall, but as I plotted my revenge, I also grappled with the moral implications of my actions. Was I becoming the villain in this story? I had spent so much time focusing on my pain that I had neglected to consider the consequences of my actions. I could ruin a man's career, destroy his livelihood, and for what? A fleeting moment of satisfaction. The thought made me uneasy, but every time I pictured my wife with him, that unease was drowned out by the fire of my anger. I also considered my own marriage. I had sworn to love my wife, to cherish her, and now I was ready to destroy another man's life because of her betrayal. The conflict waged within me. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to understand the depth of my pain, but I didn't want to turn into someone I didn't recognize. Yet, the allure of revenge was intoxicating. It was a powerful motivator, and I found myself drawn deeper into the darkness. I envisioned myself at the wedding fair, watching Mark interact with couples, putting on a charming facade while I prepared to expose him for the fraud I believed him to be. As the day approached, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. I knew I was crossing a line, but at that moment I didn't care. I was fueled by a desire for justice, however twisted it may have been. The thrill of the hunt coursed through my veins, and I was ready to unleash my plan. I gathered my materials, printed reviews, the negative testimonials, and my carefully crafted persona. I felt like an actor preparing for a role, and in that moment I was ready to play my part. I would confront him, and I would make him pay for the pain he had caused. Little did I know, this path I was on would lead me to unexpected consequences, ones that would challenge everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the price of revenge. The day of the wedding fair arrived, and I could feel the tension building within me. I dressed carefully, opting for a smart casual look that would allow me to blend in with the other attendees. I wanted to appear relaxed and approachable, the perfect potential client. As I made my way to the venue, I rehearsed my lines in my mind, envisioning how I would approach Mark and what I would say. The fair was buzzing with excitement. Couples wandered from booth to booth, chatting with photographers, florists, and planners. I took a deep breath as I stepped inside, the atmosphere charged with the promise of new beginnings. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on Mark almost immediately. He was standing at his booth, engaging a young couple with that signature smile, the one that had once made me trust him completely. I felt a surge of anger, but I pushed it down, reminding myself that I was here for a purpose. I approached his booth, my heart racing, and when he noticed me, he flashed that same charming smile. "Hi there, looking for a photographer?" he asked, his voice smooth and inviting. "Actually, yes," I replied, forcing a smile of my own. "I've been looking for someone to capture my wedding, but I've heard mixed reviews about your work." His demeanor shifted slightly, the smile faltering as he tried to maintain his composure. "I appreciate your interest. I can assure you that my clients are always satisfied with my services." I could see the flicker of concern in his eyes, and it fueled my resolve. "Really, I've heard from a few couples that their experiences weren't as great as you might think, Some even mentioned issues with communication and delivery. I watched as he shifted uncomfortably, the confidence he had exuded just moments ago crumbling. "That's not typical at all," he stammered. "I pride myself on my work and I always strive to meet my clients' expectations." "Oh, I see," I said, feigning innocence. "I just think it's important to hear both sides before making a decision, don't you?" I smiled, a veneer of politeness masking the storm brewing beneath the surface. As I continued to engage him, I glanced around the booth, taking stock of the promotional materials he had displayed. His portfolio was impressive, but now it felt tainted. I wanted to rip apart the illusion he had built around himself, to expose the cracks in his perfect facade. "Have you ever had any major complaints?" I pressed, watching as he hesitated, searching for the right words. I could see the sweat forming on his brow, and it filled me with a sense of satisfaction. "Every photographer has a few unhappy clients," he finally admitted, but I could tell he was trying to downplay it. "It's part of the business. I can show you some of my best work if you'd like." "No, that's okay," I said, cutting him off. "I think I've heard enough." I took a step back, maintaining eye contact as I prepared to deliver the final blow. "I just wanted to give you a heads up. I wouldn't want anyone to feel misled, you know." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, a mixture of confusion and anxiety etched across his face. I felt a rush of adrenaline, a high that came from executing my plan. But as I moved through the fair, mingling with other vendors and couples, I began to feel the weight of what I had done. I spent the next few hours gathering more information, speaking to other vendors about their experiences with Mark. I learned about a few more incidents where clients had expressed dissatisfaction, and I tucked those stories away, knowing they would serve as ammunition for my campaign against him. But as the day wore on, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was crossing a line. I had set out to expose him, to ruin his career, but at what cost? I could feel the darkness creeping in, the moral ambiguity of my actions gnawing at my conscience. After the fair, I returned home, my mind racing. I had done what I set out to do, but in the aftermath I felt hollow. I had been so consumed by revenge that I had lost sight of myself. I knew I had to take it further. This was just the beginning. I needed to ensure that word got out, that his reputation would be irreparably damaged. I began drafting posts for social media, detailing my concerns and sharing the negative testimonials I had gathered. I knew I had to be careful. I didn't want to come off as a bitter ex-husband, but rather as a concerned individual looking out for couples about to make a significant decision. As I typed, I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. The more I wrote, the more I felt like I was losing a part of myself. I was becoming the very thing I hated, a man consumed by vengeance. But I couldn't stop now. I had to see this through to the end. I hit post, and just like that I had unleashed the first wave of my revenge. I watched as the comments began to pour in, some supportive, others questioning my motives. My heart raced as I realized the gravity of what I had done. I had taken the first step down a path of destruction, and there was no turning back. In the days that followed my initial post, the fallout was swift and unrelenting. I watched as Mark's reputation began to crumble before my eyes. The comments section of my post exploded with responses, couples sharing their own negative experiences, others expressing disbelief that someone could betray the trust of so many. I felt a surge of satisfaction, a twisted sense of justice that fueled my resolve. This was only the beginning. Mark's social media accounts became battlegrounds, with potential clients questioning his integrity and past clients sharing their grievances. I felt a dark thrill course through me each time I received a notification of another comment or share. It was as if I were orchestrating a symphony of revenge, and the notes were playing out perfectly. But with each passing day, as the negativity grew, so did an unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. I had set this in motion, and now I was witnessing its consequences firsthand. Mark's once charming persona was fading into desperation. I saw him post frantic responses, attempting to defend himself, but the damage was done. His clients canceled bookings, and I could feel the weight of his downfall pressing down on me. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through the latest updates. I saw a post from Mark stating that he would be stepping back from photography to focus on his mental health. A wave of guilt washed over me. Had I gone too far? The thrill I once felt began to dissipate, replaced by a gnawing sense of regret. I thought about my wife, the woman who had set this chain of events in motion. She had betrayed me, yes, but did that justify the destruction I was causing? I had wanted to make her feel the pain of her actions, but now I was realizing that I was hurting more than just Mark. I was tearing apart the life of a man who had made a mistake, just as I had been a victim of one. That night I confronted my wife. I needed to understand her perspective and see if there was any part of her that felt remorse for what had happened. I found her in the living room, scrolling through her phone, an expression of worry etched on her face. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with tension. She looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Sure, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I've been doing some digging into Mark. I've been posting about him online." Her face paled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been sharing experiences, gathering testimonials. It's not just about you anymore. It's about what he did to us, and I want him to pay for that." She stared at me, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. "You can't be serious. You're ruining his life. What good is that going to do?" "Good, it's about justice. He took what was mine." She shook her head, frustration creeping into her voice. "And what about us? What are you doing to our marriage? You think this is going to fix things? It's only driving us further apart." I felt a pang of realization. She was right. I had become so consumed by revenge that I was losing sight of what truly mattered. My anger had blinded me to the fact that I was sacrificing my own happiness. I didn't want to be this person. I just wanted him to hurt like I do. I admitted, my voice breaking. "But now I see that I'm hurting myself more than anyone else." She sighed, her expression softening. "We need to find a way to heal, not to destroy. This isn't the answer." Her words resonated with me, and I began to understand the weight of my actions. I had set out to destroy Mark, but in doing so, I was tearing apart the fabric of my own life. I realized I needed to make a choice, to continue down this path of vengeance or to seek a path of healing for both of us. The next day, I made a decision. I deleted my posts, each click of the button feeling like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I reached out to the people who had shared their experiences and apologized for any harm I had caused. I knew that I couldn't undo the damage I had done, but I could at least stop the cycle of destruction. As I watched Mark's reputation begin to recover, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. I had taken my revenge, but it had come at a great cost. I had lost a part of myself in the process, and it was time to focus on rebuilding my own life, my marriage, and my sense of self. I sat down with my wife, and we talked openly about our feelings, our fears, and our hopes for the future. It was a difficult conversation, but it was necessary. I realized that healing would take time, and it wouldn't be easy, but we were willing to work on it together. As I reflected on the chaos I had unleashed, I understood that revenge had not brought me peace. It had only deepened the wounds. I had learned a painful lesson about the consequences of my actions, and I hoped to move forward with a renewed sense of purpose, one that focused on healing rather than destruction. As the weeks turned into months, the aftershocks of my actions began to settle. I had made amends with my wife, and while the road to healing was fraught with challenges, we were committed to rebuilding what had been broken. We attended couples therapy, where we learned to communicate more openly and honestly. It was a difficult process, but I could feel the walls slowly coming down between us. In the quiet moments, I often reflected on the choices I had made and the man I had become. The thirst for revenge had consumed me, and in the pursuit of hurting Mark, I had nearly lost everything that truly mattered. I realized that my actions had not only impacted him but had also threatened the foundation of my marriage. One evening, as I sat on the porch with my wife, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had been given a second chance, not just in my marriage but in my understanding of love, trust, and forgiveness. I knew that I had to let go of the anger that had once fueled me. "Do you remember when we first met?" I asked her. smile creeping onto my face. She chuckled softly, her eyes sparkling with warmth. Of course, how could I forget? You were so nervous. I admitted, laughing at the memory. I thought you were the most beautiful woman in the room, and I was terrified I'd mess it up. Her laughter filled the air, and for the first time in a long while I felt the weight of my past lift. I was reminded of the love we had built, the laughter we had shared, and the dreams we still had ahead of us. As I continued to reflect on my journey, I realized that revenge had not been the answer to my pain. It had only deepened the wounds and led me down a path I never wanted to travel. I had sought to hurt Mark for the betrayal he had inflicted on me, but in doing so, I had hurt myself and the one person I loved most. I reached for my wife's hand, intertwining our fingers. "I'm sorry for everything I put you through," I said sincerely. I let my anger take control, and I lost sight of what truly matters. She squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with understanding. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them and grow stronger together." It was a powerful realization. I had learned that revenge was a hollow pursuit, one that only served to perpetuate the cycle of pain. Instead, I chose to focus on healing, on rebuilding not just my marriage but also my own sense of self. I decided to reach out to Mark one last time. I wrote him a message, acknowledging the pain I had caused and expressing my regrets. I didn't expect forgiveness, but I hoped that by taking responsibility for my actions, I could begin to heal the wounds I had inflicted, both on myself and on him. To my surprise, he responded. His message was measured, and while it was clear he was still hurt, he expressed a willingness to move forward. "We all make mistakes," he wrote. "I appreciate your honesty and hope we can both find peace in our lives." It was a small step, but it felt significant. In that moment, I understood that closure was not about revenge. It was about acknowledging our shared humanity and the mistakes we made along the way. As I looked at my wife beside me, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We had weathered the storm, and while the scars of betrayal would always remain, they would serve as reminders of the strength we found in each other. We had chosen to rise above the darkness, to embrace love and forgiveness, and to move forward together. I had learned that life is too short to be consumed by anger. In the end, the true victory was not in revenge, but in reclaiming my life, my marriage, and my happiness. I had faced the darkness and emerged on the other side, ready to embrace the light. And as I sat there, hand in hand with the woman I loved, I knew that I would never again allow anger to dictate my choices. I had found my way back to the man I wanted to be, and I was ready to embrace the future with hope and love.